My neighbor built a fence across my property. I asked him to move it. He laughed. A week later, my mailbox was smashed. My tires were slashed, and I realized this wasn't about land anymore. It was personal. When I first saw the fence, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. The morning sun had just risen, pouring golden light over my backyard, and there it was, a brand new wooden fence slicing through the edge of my garden. Fresh, tall, polished, and completely out of place. I walked closer, still half in my slippers. My tomato plants, my pride, were crushed under the posts. My rose bushes had been dug out. And worst of all, I realized something. This fence wasn't on the line. It was 5 feet into my property. Mr. Harlan, my neighbor, stood on the other side, holding a hammer like he'd conquered something. He looked up, smirked, and said, "Morning, Clara. Finally decided to fix this boundary issue? I felt heat rush to my face. My dad had built this house 30 years ago. The lines were surveyed, registered, and printed in black and white. There was no issue. But there he was, acting like he owned it. I think you made a mistake, I said, trying to stay calm. That fence is on my property. He chuckled. Your property? Oh, no. I checked the old plat maps. Turns out this strip's mine. He didn't blink. He didn't even hesitate. It wasn't a mistake. It was a move. That evening, I dug through old files looking for the survey map. I found it, folded and yellowed, and called the county clerk to confirm the coordinates. I was right, every inch of it. The next morning, I placed orange survey flags exactly where the line was. The fence stood mocking me, 5 feet beyond. When Harlan came out again, I showed him the documents. He looked, smiled, and said, "Sue me." It was in that moment, not when I saw the fence, but when he said those two words, that I realized what kind of war I was stepping into. Because this wasn't about land anymore. It was about pride. What would you have done in my place? Confront him again, or go straight to the authorities? Part 2, the line in the dirt. The next few days felt like walking through someone else's nightmare. Every time I looked out my kitchen window, that fence stared back, tall, smug, splitting the yard like a scar. I tried to stay calm. I told myself I'd handle it the right way. I called the county office, emailed the property survey, and even printed out copies for proof. They said they'd look into it. That was Tuesday. By Thursday, nothing. Meanwhile, Harlan acted like he'd won. He started planting bushes along my side of the fence. He even had the nerve to paint it bright brown, the same color as his house, as if marking his territory. I walked over once, papers in hand, and said, "You can't just take part of someone's yard." He didn't even turn around. He kept painting. "You keep saying it's yours, Clara," he said, "but paper doesn't make it true. Dirt does dirt." He said it like it was sacred, like the ground beneath my feet had suddenly switched sides. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the kitchen, staring at the map spread across the table, my hands trembling. My father's handwriting was still in the corner. Lot 32, Dawson's, 1994. This land wasn't just mine, legally. It was part of my family's story. Every inch of it had memory. My mother's garden, my brother's treehouse, our dog's old play area. And now, one man was trying to erase all of that in 5 feet at a time. The next morning, I hired a surveyor, a calm, quiet man named Lewis. He arrived with tripods, measuring tools, and a kind smile. Harlan watched from his porch, pretending to sip coffee, but I could feel his stare burning holes in my back. Lewis confirmed everything. The fence was exactly 5 feet and 3 inches over the property line. He took photos, measurements, and gave me a signed report. I felt a rush of relief. Finally proof. But the moment Harlan saw him packing up, he walked over. "You really think this little report's going to change anything?" he said. "You'll see, Clara. Sometimes the system favors the strong." I didn't answer. I just stared at him, his smirk, his arrogance, and realized that this wasn't going to end peacefully. That night, when I went outside to water my plants, I found something new. My garden hose had been slashed clean through, my shed door left wide open, my tools scattered like someone wanted me to know they had been there. My hands shook as I picked up the broken hose. Somewhere in the dark, a motion light flicked on from Harlan's side, and through the slats of the fence I saw it, a pair of eyes watching me. I whispered under my breath, "You want a war, Mr. Harlan? You've got one. If you were in my shoes and your neighbor started destroying your property, would you call the police immediately or confront him face to face?" The next morning, I woke up to the sound of hammering again. I rushed outside, heart pounding, and there he was, tightening the boards on his side of the fence like a man preparing for battle. "Morning, Clara," he called out with that same smug tone. "Fence needed a little reinforcement. Don't want it falling onto your side." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I wanted to shout, to tear those boards down, to make him stop pretending this was normal. But instead, I grabbed my phone and recorded everything. The hammering, the fence, his smirk. Evidence. I uploaded the surveyor's report to the county website that afternoon. I even emailed the zoning department, attaching photos and timestamps. Still no response. Bureaucracy moved slower than guilt. By the weekend, I decided if no one else would draw the line, I would. I called my friend Ellie. She's an attorney. I told her everything. She sighed and said, "He's pushing to see how far you'll go. You have to make it official before he claims squatters' rights. Squatters' rights." The phrase made me sick. The idea that someone could just take something that was mine because I didn't fight fast enough felt unreal. That night, I printed no trespassing signs and nailed them on the fence. Every few feet. My hands shook, but I did it anyway. And maybe it was petty, but I also sprayed a thin white chalk line along the true boundary, Lewis's measurement, right over his gravel path. A message, a warning. 2 days later, I came home from work and found every sign ripped off, the chalk line washed away. In their place, someone had spray painted across the wooden boards in dripping red letters, "Mind your own land." My stomach dropped. That's when I called the sheriff. The deputy arrived in a dusty cruiser, took a look, and sighed. "It's a civil dispute, ma'am. Unless there's damage or a direct threat, not much we can do." I pointed at the vandalism, the broken hose, the boundary proof. He nodded politely but wrote nothing down. And before he left, he looked over at Harlan's porch where my neighbor sat pretending to read a newspaper. The deputy gave him a polite wave, and Harlan waved back. Like old friends, I felt my chest tighten. The air between our houses suddenly felt poisoned. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. So I did something I probably shouldn't have. When the clock hit midnight, I went outside with a flashlight. The fence looked enormous in the dark, towering and smug. I aimed the beam across it and noticed something shiny wedged near the base. A camera. He'd hidden a camera on my side. I picked it up, shaking, and whispered to myself, "All right, Harlan. You want proof? I'll give you proof. If you discovered your neighbor had planted a hidden camera on your property, what would you do? Confront them directly or take it straight to the police?" The camera sat on my kitchen table all night, small, black, a single red light blinking like a heartbeat. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that fence, that smirk, that red paint spelling out his message. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to expose him. I plugged the camera into my laptop. The memory card loaded instantly. There were hundreds of short clips, motion-triggered footage from my own backyard, me watering plants, me taking out the trash, me sitting on my porch drinking coffee. He'd been watching me for days, maybe weeks. I felt sick. My skin crawled. I printed stills from the footage and drove straight to the sheriff's office. The same deputy from before was there. When he saw the camera, his expression changed. He called his supervisor. Suddenly, everyone started taking notes. They said it could count as unlawful surveillance, possibly even harassment, and promised to investigate. But I'd heard that before. Promises didn't fix fences. So I went further. I emailed the local newspaper, sent photos, survey maps, vandalism shots, and now, camera evidence. If the system wouldn't protect me, maybe the spotlight would. By evening, the headline went online. Local property dispute escalates into feud. Neighbor accused of illegal monitoring. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would make him back off. I was wrong. The next morning, the newspaper was gone from my driveway. Torn, shredded, scattered like confetti on the grass. And on my porch, nailed into the wood, was a single wooden plank, the same kind used in his fence. Carved into it were 3 words. "Drop it, Clara." For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. My throat felt dry, my chest hollow. Fear and anger mixed together until I couldn't tell them apart. That night, I installed motion lights, bought new cameras, ones facing his direction. Ellie helped me file a restraining order request, but she warned me, until it's approved, he's still free to talk, walk, and build. So I built 2 walls around my heart. I stopped walking in the yard, stopped gardening. Even my cat Willow refused to go near that side of the house. One evening, I saw him standing by the fence, beer in hand, staring at the sky like nothing had happened. When he noticed me watching, he smiled. The kind of smile that said, "You think you're winning? Wait." And deep down, I knew. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about who would break first. If someone kept pushing you like this, invading your space, ignoring your warnings, when would you draw the line? It's strange how silence can sound like a scream. For days after that plank showed up on my porch, the neighborhood felt tense, like everyone could sense the war brewing behind our fences. People stopped waving when they drove by. Kids avoided walking past my house. Even the mailman began leaving letters at the very edge of my driveway, like he didn't want to get too close. Harlan, meanwhile, carried on like he'd done nothing wrong. He'd mow his lawn early every morning, whistling loudly, the sound slicing through the air. Sometimes I'd catch him glancing over the fence, just a flick of the eyes quick enough to sting. Every sound made me jump. The creak of a door, the hum of a car, even the wind brushing against the fence made my chest tighten. Then one night, it happened again. I woke to the sound of wood cracking. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed a flashlight, rushed to the window, and saw him. Harlan was on my side of the property, prying one of his fence boards loose. I ran outside, shouting, "Get off my land!" He froze, turned slowly, and said, "Just fixing it, Clara." "Don't get hysterical." "Hysterical?" I snapped. "You broke into my yard." He shrugged, stepped closer to the fence line. "It's my yard, sweetheart." And that word, sweetheart, hit me like a slap. I took a step forward, my voice shaking but loud. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police again." He smirked. "Go ahead. They'll tell you the same thing. Civil matter." He walked back to his side like he'd already won, but I couldn't let him. Not this time. The next morning, I went to the county office myself, waited 3 hours just to speak to someone who could listen. When I finally sat down with the property clerk, I spread everything across her desk. The survey, the vandalism photos, the sheriff's report, the camera stills. She read silently for a long time. Then she looked up and said, "You've got a strong case, Miss Dawson. File a claim." "Don't wait," I did. That same afternoon, I officially filed a civil suit. Clara Dawson versus John Harlan. It felt like signing a declaration of war. When the papers were served 2 days later, he stood at his mailbox reading them while I watched from my porch. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just looked up at me, his smile gone now, and mouthed one word: mistake. That night, his porch light stayed on till morning, and I swear I could feel his anger through the air, heavy and electric, like a storm that hadn't broken yet. Would you have filed the lawsuit at this point, or tried one last time to make peace? The day after the lawsuit was filed, the sky turned gray. Not metaphorically, literally. Heavy clouds rolled in, wind picking up just enough to rattle every loose thing around the neighborhood. It felt like the world was matching his mood. For a few quiet hours, nothing happened. Then small things began. My trash bin tipped over mysteriously. My mailbox flag bent sideways. Footprints, muddy deep, appeared near my shed. I took photos of everything, my hands trembling so hard they blurred. That night, thunder cracked overhead and rain poured down like a warning. I was sitting by the window when I saw the glow of headlights outside. Harlan's truck. It pulled halfway up the curb, lights flashing across the fence. He sat there for a while, engine running, staring straight ahead. Then he revved it once, loud, angry, and drove off. I didn't sleep a second. My cat hid under the couch. Every flash of lightning made me jump. By morning, I discovered the fence had collapsed halfway down. The posts on his side were intact, but several on mine were broken clean through, like someone had kicked them deliberately. The boards lay twisted on the wet grass, mud smeared across the wood like fingerprints. I called the sheriff again. This time, a different deputy came, younger, colder. He looked over the damage, took a few photos, then said, "Could be storm damage, ma'am." Hard to prove, otherwise I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "He's been threatening me for weeks. He has a camera. He painted my fence. He raised a hand, cutting me off gently. Ma'am, until the court hearing, best you avoid any contact. Let the process handle it. The process. The process that crawled while Harlan sprinted. 2 days later, I woke to find tire marks across my driveway. Someone had driven over my flower beds. My roses, my mother's roses, were crushed into mud. I stood there barefoot in the dirt, rain still dripping from the roof, and something inside me snapped. I walked straight to the fence, no, what was left of it, and shouted across, "Harlan, you think this is funny?" Silence. Then a door creaked. He stepped out, calm, casual, like he'd been waiting. "You should have left it alone, Clara," he said softly. "You poked the bear." For a moment, we just stared at each other through the rain. The wind howled, the broken fence swayed, and I realized something. He didn't want the land anymore. He wanted the fight. When I went back inside, I found muddy footprints on my porch steps, new ones, leading toward the door. My hands shook as I locked every bolt, closed every curtain, and whispered to myself, he's not just crossing lines anymore, he's crossing limits. If your neighbor's feud turned this personal, vandalism, threats, and silence, would you stay and fight or move away for your own peace? I didn't step outside for 2 full days after that. I worked from home, curtains drawn, doors locked, lights dim. Even the creak of the old house made me flinch. But fear does something strange to you. After it runs its course, it hardens, turns into resolve. And by the 3rd morning, I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. I started documenting everything. Every noise, every light flicker, every muddy footprint. I bought a small dash cam and aimed it at the fence line from my window. I wrote the dates, the times, the smells, the sounds. Ellie told me, if you want to win, you need proof that can't be denied. So I gathered it, all of it. By the end of the week, I had a folder thick with photos and footage. One of the clips showed him walking across my side during the night, flashlight in hand, hammer dangling. He didn't even try to hide it. That was my moment. The next morning, I took the footage to Ellie's office. She played it twice, leaned back and said, "This changes everything. We're filing for an emergency injunction." I felt lighter walking out of her office. For the first time in weeks, I believed this nightmare might end, but the universe has a cruel sense of timing. When I got home that evening, something smelled strange, like burning plastic. I followed the scent to my backyard. The remains of my tool shed were still smoking. The walls blackened, the roof half collapsed. The air was thick with ash and melted paint. I called the fire department, voice shaking. They came, wrote a report, and said the same word everyone had said to me for weeks. Suspicious. But suspicious didn't stop him. That night, I sat in the dark on my porch holding my phone tight, waiting. Around midnight, I saw movement, a shadow near the fence. I hit record. It was Harlan. He stood there, flashlight off this time, just watching. Then he said quietly, almost to himself, "You think you're clever, don't you?" Then he spat into the dirt and walked away. I sent that clip to Ellie first thing in the morning. She didn't even reply with words, just sent me a court date confirmation and one line, "We've got him." The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. 2 weeks of tension, silence, and sleepless nights. But I started to fight back in small ways. I rebuilt the fence, on my line, this time with bright white boards. Clean, strong, impossible to ignore. He came out halfway through, watching me nail the final post. "You'll regret this," he muttered. I looked up at him, met his eyes, and said, "Not as much as you will." For the first time, his smirk faltered. "Would you have kept pushing like I did? Or stepped back after the fire, fearing things might turn even darker?" The courthouse smelled like paper and old wood. My palms were damp as I clutched the folder. Months of photos, videos, reports, and the one piece of footage that showed him trespassing under moonlight. Ellie sat beside me, calm and sharp, her dark blazer pressed and perfect. "Don't react to him," she whispered. "Let the evidence speak." When Harlan walked in, he didn't look like the man who'd terrorized me for months. He wore a clean gray suit, hair slicked back, face blank. If I hadn't known him, I might have thought he was respectable. But I knew the truth buried under that calm, the sneer, the malice, the arrogance. He glanced at me once, then smirked, that same smirk that had started all of this. And in that moment, every sleepless night, every broken thing, every inch of stolen peace hit me all over again. The judge entered. The bailiff called order. It felt like the room itself held its breath. Ellie started strong. Photos, reports, timestamps. She laid everything out one by one. The court clerk passed them forward. My heart raced as each image flashed on the monitor. The broken fence, the vandalized porch, the burned shed. Then came the video. The one where he crossed onto my property, flashlight in hand. The judge watched it twice. No one spoke. Finally, Harlan's lawyer stood, smooth, confident. "Your Honor," he said, "my client maintains that the property line has been unclear for years. Any alleged trespassing was unintentional. The shed fire, no proof ties him to it." Then, as if on cue, Harlan sighed dramatically. "I've tried to be neighborly," he said. "I offered to split the cost of moving the fence, but she refused. She's been obsessed, filming me, stalking me, turning this into something it's not." My blood boiled. Ellie placed a hand on mine before I could speak. "Ms. Dawson," the judge said, "do you wish to respond?" I stood slowly, throat dry. Your Honor, that man didn't just build a fence on my land. He built months of fear around it. He watched me through cameras. He vandalized my property. He wanted to prove he could take whatever he wanted. But this, I gestured to the evidence pile, my voice steady now. This is proof that he can't. The courtroom was silent. Even his lawyer stopped flipping papers. The judge leaned back, eyes scanning both sides. Then she said, "The survey and evidence are clear. The encroachment is illegal. Mr. Harlan is ordered to remove the structure immediately and pay restitution for property damage." For a second, I didn't move. I just stared at her, barely believing the words. Ellie squeezed my hand, whispering, "You won, Clara." Across the room, Harlan's mask cracked. His eyes darkened, cold, furious. He didn't shout, didn't speak. He just stood, jaw tight, and walked out without looking back. But I knew him well enough to understand. This wasn't over. Not yet. If you had just won in court against someone like Harlan, would you celebrate right away? Or wait, knowing he might try something worse afterward? Winning in court didn't feel like victory. It felt like holding your breath underwater, relief mixed with the fear that something would pull you down again. For the first few days, the neighborhood was quiet. No shouting, no banging on fences, no late-night footsteps in the yard, just the wind, the trees, and the distant hum of summer insects. Ellie told me to relax. "He's cornered," she said. "He can't touch you now." But I'd seen the way he walked out of that courtroom. Slow, cold, silent. That silence meant something. On the fourth night, I saw the first sign. The motion light flickered at 2 a.m. I checked the camera feed. Nothing but shadows. Still, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, the crew arrived to remove the illegal fence. I watched from the porch as they cut through the posts one by one. Every snap of wood sounded like a bone breaking, pieces of his control falling apart. When the workers were done, they handed me the final section of the fence. "You want us to throw this out?" one asked. I looked at the splintered wood, the chipped paint, the nail heads sticking out like teeth. "No," I said. "Leave it." That night, I dragged the last fence piece to the fire pit and lit it. The flames rose high, bright orange against the black sky. I stood there, barefoot in the dirt, watching it burn until it was nothing but ash. It should have felt like closure, but deep down it didn't. It felt like I'd just declared the next round. 2 days later, Ellie called. The payment came through. He wired the restitution. "Maybe he's finally done, Clara." "Maybe," I said softly, staring at the empty space where the fence once stood. That night, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name, written in careful, slanted handwriting. Inside was a single photo. My house, taken from the woods. On the back, "You took what's mine." "I'll take it back," I froze. My stomach dropped. I could hear my heartbeat echo in my ears. The next morning, I gave the letter to the police. They promised to look into it, but I saw the same tired look in their eyes. Paperwork, not urgency. So I decided to do something different. I wasn't going to wait for him to make his next move. If Harlan wanted to play this game again, I'd finish it, on my terms. If you received a threatening letter after winning a court case, would you confront the person behind it, or disappear and start over somewhere new? That letter didn't scare me anymore. It clarified things. Harlan wasn't angry about land or fences or court rulings. He was angry about losing. And people like him, they don't stop until they think they've won again. So I set a trap. The first thing I did was replace my old cameras with new ones. Hidden, silent. A few were decoys, glowing red in plain sight. But the real ones, the ones that mattered, were tucked under the eaves, behind flower pots, and in the tall grass facing the woods. Then I waited. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The house stood still, my phone stayed quiet, and for a moment, I almost hoped maybe he'd moved on. But on the 4th night, around 1:30 a.m., the motion alert pinged. My phone buzzed once. Then again, then again. I opened the feed. And there he was, Harlan, moving slow, careful, dressed in black, hood up. He slipped through the side gate like he'd done it 100 times before. In his hand, something metallic, a crowbar maybe. My heart should have raced, but it didn't. It just steadied, because I knew I had him. The cameras caught every second. The trespass, the tools, the face. I didn't even go outside. I just called Ellie and then the police. Then the RE. By the time they arrived, he was still in my yard, trying to pry open the side shed. When the flashlights hit him, he froze. The look on his face was something I'll never forget. Not fear, not anger. Just disbelief that I had beaten him this time. The officers cuffed him quietly. He didn't fight. He just stared at the ground while they read his rights. The next morning, Ellie called. "He's being charged," she said. "You're free of him now." Free. I walked to the edge of my property that afternoon. The air smelled clean after the rain. The fence line was open, just grass and light stretching across the boundary. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. I looked at the spot where the old fence once stood and whispered, "You were never the wall, Harlan. You were just the shadow behind it." Then I turned around, went inside, and closed the door. And this time, the quiet finally felt like home. If someone kept pushing you past your limits, would you fight back until the end or walk away to protect your peace?